So much attention today is paid to increasing energy efficiency as a way of going green, yet sustainable production is an equally important consideration for the ICT industry.
If you think about the communications industry, its own footprint carries through its life cycle of development. There's carbon in creating literally the materials, the enclosures, the computer boards, and the chips, and so on. There's also the manufacturing process, and of course these things are shipped around the world, they're used, and then at some point they're decommissioned and recycled or disposed of. So all of that creates a carbon footprint.
The energy in the production of an integrated circuit as opposed to the energy in its life cycle. So the idea here is that compared to a refrigerator is an expensive, durable good to make, and most of its cost is in running it. So 5 to 7% of its cost is in its manufacture. This is in terms of carbon footprint. And 90-something% of its cost is in running it. You just switch that around with computers or ICTs or mobile phones. 75% of its carbon footprint is in its manufacture because it's a very heavy manufacturing process for ICTs.
Green production is not just about the use of materials. Everything from packaging and distribution to energy use in the manufacturing environment play their part. Companies have to consider the full product life cycle, otherwise known as cradle-to-grave philosophy.
Companies are increasingly getting the message, and I think realizing the reality that a green supply chain is also a lean supply chain, and that there is cost, inefficiency to be wrung out of their own internal operations as well as their interface or dealings with companies in their supply chain. They can realize more efficient costs, reducing the amount of packaging that goes into products, for example, using more recyclable materials or reusable materials in the packaging.
Being eco-friendly actually starts with manufacturing. And as you can see here, the materials we've selected are eco-friendly. This is actually plastic that comes from plastic bottles. The next step is ecologically friendly packaging. So this is recycled paper. It is soybean environmentally friendly ink, so that's all recycled and recyclable. Then it goes to the life of the phone, and as you can see, the phone there has an energy saving mode, and the interface itself is energy saving. This one will charge with solar panels. It also has Energy Star rated charging devices. And then at the end of the phone's life, well, you want to recycle it. You don't want to just throw it away. And we've made that very simple for our consumers. There's a place on our website where you can download a postage prepaid label that you can then put on an envelope, put your phone in, send it to us for recycling.
Part of our job in the industry is to be smart about materials that we select, to make sure they're not hazardous, to make sure that we reuse as many components as possible, to recycle them, to make sure they're disposed of properly, to minimize how much we have to ship and the distance that they have to be shipped. So there's quite a bit that we can do to decrease our own footprint, even in the manufacturing process.
In the developing world, green production is demonstrated in the smallest of measures. Grameen Shakti provides solar power to local women who in turn run small manufacturing plants in their own homes, producing solar-powered mobile chargers.
We are providing a solar panel, and then we have a electricity produced in the battery, and they can use the soldering iron. Small soldering things can be done from the solar energy. So this is good. Even a non-electrified area, women producing solar accessories from the electricity generated from the solar.
Pressure for green production and processing increasingly comes from companies that include green requirements in their vendor selection process. But regulations also play a key role.
These regulations they're growing out of Europe, and they're becoming more prevalent. And they've spawned companies to start looking at how they can green up their entire life cycle.
ICT equipment contains a number of toxic elements in it, some of which are being reduced now with something called the ROS directive, which is a set of standards which has been enacted in Europe. But still, there's elements and substances like lead, cadmium, mercury, many other toxic substances that are embedded mostly in circuit boards and are very difficult to get out of them. And when I asked somebody from the U.S. EPA when we would have a non-toxic circuit board, they laughed and asked me if I was serious.
RoHS, restriction of hazardous substances, requires the companies to look at all of the components within their product and make sure that these restricted substances are held to the small levels that are now regulated.
The TIA's EIA track provides manufacturers with a way of keeping up to date and on top of the latest regulations.
EIA track was designed 9 years ago by the Industry Association, Electronics Industry Alliance, which was an umbrella association, by the request of about 10 to 15 starting companies, huge electronics companies. They realized they were all paying for the same legal services to look at these regulations that at the time were coming out of Europe. Since its inception, EIA Track has grown from about 10 members to 135 subscribing companies. The companies subscribe in order to get legal analysis on the regulations. So we're generally the first to track and break what's happening around the globe, as well as analyze it for companies and many users within the companies to be able to understand how they can build these regulations into their life cycle.
Almost every week there will be a rule proposed somewhere in the world by some jurisdiction. And this tool then provides intelligence on that. It will provide regulatory alerts that will alert companies to the fact that there is a new development in some jurisdiction. Now companies, of course, want to develop to one standard for the world. It's not very attractive for companies to produce different types of products for different regions in the world. So that tends to mean that the product design is driven by the most stringent requirements.
Over the next 2 episodes, we were taking a closer look at ICT devices, in particular mobile phones, and we'll highlight the global problem of e-waste, recycling and reuse, and show how handset companies like Sony Ericsson here are addressing the issues of full product life cycle.